What's up, Bikerumor fans? Behind me are all four of Shimano's 12-speed mountain bike groups. We got Deore, SLX, XT, and of course, XTR. Now that they finally have a proper 1x12 mountain bike group all the way up and down the line, we wanted to see how they compare. In this video, I'm going to show you the material differences and why those material differences matter, along with some of the really unique and special features of Shimano's groups as a whole. If you've been wondering how Deore compares to SLX, how that stacks up to XT, and of course how all of them try and keep up with XTR, I'm about to show you all of that, plus which components make the most sense to upgrade, and this video will give you everything you need to know about Shimano's mountain bike groups. Overall, you'll notice four main things about the different parts at each price point. In appearance, the groups differ slightly, with the top level groups having higher end finishes. The top end stuff will have tighter tolerances, and the fit and finish of everything is going to look and feel a bit more premium. Obviously, XTR is the lightest components, usually due to different materials or the design of the components. The top end stuff is more durable, but honestly, everything is super durable. It's just that some of the materials used in XT and XTR makes the parts less prone to wear. Anytime things have tighter tolerances and more advanced construction, they typically last longer. Another thing worth noting, on the higher end groups, more of the parts and pieces are made in Japan in Shimano's own factory, where there's higher QC standards and tighter tolerances held than their other factories in other countries. Even the weight ranges are held to tighter and tighter tolerances as you go up the line, which is why you won't see claimed published weights for the Dior group anywhere on Shimano's websites. One last thing. Those tighter tolerances and higher quality control when you get to the XTR level is why this group has a 3-year warranty where all the others carry a 2-year warranty. Okay, let's take a close look at everything component by component. We'll start with the chains, because as you'll see, their design ties a lot of other things together across the groups. For the most part, they're very similar. The key differences are in materials treatments designed to improve durability and efficiency. So I wanted to quickly mention two of the treatments Shimano uses. Bear with me, because understanding these will make it clear how the chains get better as they go up in price. Siltec is an advanced plating process that bonds fluorine particles to the metal, creating an ultra-slick, low-friction surface. It also reduces noise dramatically, and this is Shimano's premium anti-friction treatment. If you really want to get in the weeds, here's how it works. Fluorine is a highly reactive material, and so when it comes into contact with something, in this case the metal on the chains, it wants to form a very strong chemical bond. And once all those little holes and things are fulfilled and it has that bond, it really doesn't want to let go. Meaning it's less likely to shed molecules as other materials slide over it. And this, Shimano says, is the main cause of friction, when molecules react with each other as they come in contact. So if you can reduce the number of molecules that are free to interact with each other, you reduce friction. Chromizing is the other treatment, and it's where they diffuse chromium into the metal to make it harder so it'll last longer. Used together, you get both benefits, more durability and less friction. But chromizing is a more expensive process, so in some cases you'll only see Siltec being used or only chromizing, and sometimes both. Starting with Deore, you have a basic high-quality steel chain with chromizing on the link pins. Step up to SLX and you get Siltec on the inner link plates and chromizing on the pins. Step up to XT and you get chromizing on the roller link plates and the pins, but no Siltec. It's worth pointing out that all of these chains weigh the same so far at 252 grams. It's only when you step up to XTR that you get the hollow pins. These drop 10 grams for a claimed weight of 242 grams. Here you get Siltec on the outer plates, and these are also known as the pin link plates, and you get Siltec on the rollers. The inner link plates and the pins both get chromizing. Are you ready for a little more geekery? The rollers don't actually roll on the pins. They roll on these little cone-shaped things that are either pressed or forged into the chains. So the roller sits on there like that, and that is what hooks into the teeth on the chainring, and that's what spins. These pins, these don't actually spin. Shimano says that's why the inner link plate treatment and the pin treatment is more important than any fancy surface treatment for the rollers themselves, and it's why only XTR's chains get the Siltec on the rollers. Okay, that's quite enough about chains for now. There's actually a lot more to show you, but I want to show you some of the other components first, because then when we go back to chains, it'll make a lot more sense as to why they do what they do. So let's move on to cranks. Now, for cranks, all except for Deore use their Holotech 2 construction, which basically just means they're hollow forged. And that also means that everything but Deore is made at their factory in Japan. Deore is made at Shimano's Malaysian factory, and it's worth pointing out that Shimano makes all of their own components in their own factories. They're just not all made at the Sakai Intelligent plant in Osaka, Japan. That's based at their headquarters, and that place is reserved for the very best components they make. For Deore, you have forged arms, and they're not hollow. Instead, they use this channel back here to reduce weight. One of the cool things about Deore is you get this color-changing logo on the side. It gives it a much higher end look and feel than the price would suggest. For the chainring, it looks kind of like a forearm spider where the chainring bolts on, but that's not the case. And I'll explain that in just a moment. The Deore crankset with chainring weighs in at 789 grams. With SLX, you step it up to Holotech 2. So these are hollow forged arms with no seams or anything inside them. So Shimano works their metal magic to get them hollow inside. They give it a very nice brushed finish here with a matte finish in the middle, and it's really a high-end look for a mid-level group. All of Shimano's cranks still use a 24mm spindle. This group crankset with a 30-tooth chainring comes in at 634 grams, which is 155 grams lighter than Deore. XT is Holotech 2 also, and it's a very similar construction to SLX. So this is the SLX, this is the XT. I just want to show there's only like subtle differences in these grooves here. This one's a little bit longer on XT than on SLX. You know, from the back side, very similar shaping. The XT looks just a little bit broader and wider, where the SLX has these kind of grooves there that give it a narrower appearance, but in reality they are almost identical. The XT is just a hair taller across here. So the funny thing is the weights are so similar. XT comes in at 622 grams with the 30-tooth chainring. That's only 12 grams lighter than SLX. The matte finish is what you really are getting. This gloss here is this helicopter tape that is there just to kind of protect the arms from getting scratches and stuff. So that's XT. XTR is technically Holotech 2 also, except it's totally different. So with XTR, you get a top piece that's forged and a bottom piece that's forged. The insides are machined out to save a ton of weight, and then they're bonded together. So if you look really closely, you can see this super fine line here. That is where this bottom piece is pressed in and bonded to the outer piece, so they can get a lot more material out of there and make this a lot lighter. So the XTR crankset with a 30-tooth chainring comes in at 528 grams, which is 94 grams lighter than XT. Another big difference you'll notice is, if you look at XTR versus XT, I mean, there's a little bit of shaping and stuff, but the main thing is XTR has a built-in lock ring that attaches it, and they go without the secondary clamping bolts. So you don't have that separate lock nut there. You miss out on these, so that saves a ton of weight too. And you get a built-in adjustment bezel here to help you kind of take up any free play and get it. So the XTR is just technologically so much more advanced than any of the other cranks that they do for mountain bikes, and it shows in the price. One other thing you should know about XT and XTR. So they used to come in race and trail versions, and the main difference was the race versions had a little bit less bend so that they were in closer for a slightly narrower QFactor. The nomenclature has changed. They don't really call it race and trail now. They just call it regular and wide. I don't know. There's not really naming for it. It's numerical, but you can still get the narrower one. So if you were a cross-country racer and you wanted to bring that QFactor in, you can do it on both of these models. But imagine my hand here is the chainstays. So on boost and super boost bikes, those things, the chainstays keep growing. So what you do need to check for is clearance, and a good shop will be able to help you run those numbers. or if you're in doubt, it's really only a couple millimeters different, just go with the wider version. So you notice that their higher end cranks don't have the chainrings on them? Well, that's because for SLX, XT, and XTR, they're sold separately. Deore's comes with them, and while it looks like a standard 4-bolt affair, it's not. Dior uses a more traditional looking spider, so it looks like this is a 4-arm spider with bolt points to attach the chainring, but it's not. This is in fact a one-piece design. It's the direct mount that threads in down here, same as all of the other ones. And so Shimano says that even though it looks like you can bolt this off, you don't want to try because you can't buy the chainring separately. You just replace this whole thing, and really it's cheap enough that you wouldn't even want to mess with it anyway. So if you wanted a different size or you wore it out, just replace the whole unit. All 12-speed chainrings use Shimano's Dynamic Chain Engagement Plus, which is their take on a narrow wide design. So if you look at the wide part of the wide teeth, it's a little bit shorter radially than the thinner teeth, and that is so that they fit into a very specific shape created by the chain. Take a look at this. Do you see how it creates a little bit of a plus shape between the two outer link plates? That serves two purposes. First, so that it fits very snugly onto the wider teeth. This prevents the chain from wobbling around on the chainring, which gives Shimano a very solid and quiet chain retention. Okay, now look what happens when we bend the chain. Do you see how the inner link plate comes up and extends out past the outer link plates? That is what creates the shaping that lets it grab onto the teeth on the chainring. Those little extensions are also what create the chamfered edges that help it slide up and down the cassette, and that is what creates Hyperglide Plus. Okay, let's talk about cassettes. So the biggest differences in the cassettes are the materials they use, and that's done to either decrease weight or increase durability. All four use Hyperglide Plus, which is Shimano's latest shifting technology, and uses these shapes on the teeth to help the chain go up and down the cassette equally smoothly in both directions. They do make a 1045 cassette, but the 1051 is by far more popular, and that's what we're comparing here. In terms of gear steps, they're all the same. So for tooth jumps, you have 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 6. And it's the same for all four cassettes. One really interesting feature is how smaller cogs interface with each other. So Shimano's new microspline still uses a timing slot on there. So one larger spline and one larger gap here. And that is because the cassettes are multiple pieces here. It's not a one-piece design. You have to make sure that all of the teeth line up in the right order to make sure that that Hyperglide Plus works. So you can see all of the teeth still have that larger gap and larger slot to make sure that they're in relation to each other correctly on the free hub body. But it's the small ones that are super interesting. So I have the biggest 10 cogs mounted to a microspline free hub body, and if you notice, there is almost no lip sticking up above for that next cog to grab onto. So you can see that it is keyed. There's the timing slot, and there's a slot there. So I want to point out something interesting on this. Notice that little tiny circle right there, right in front of my thumb to the left of my thumb. So that lines up pretty much with the big slot, and that'll kind of help you get it into position a little more easily. Although it still wants to, if you notice, like it wants to catch on the wrong one. So this is where it can be a little bit finicky getting onto your hub, and you just got to make sure that you get it totally flush like that. And so now we've got that little circle. You can kind of see, I'm trying to get the glare off. You can get to see that little circle right there. You'll notice there is a little circle on that tooth right there too, and that just kind of helps you get it lined up as well, and it goes in. Now, it's not really the circle that I wanted to show you. It's that this cog is only interfacing with this cog. There's no more spline or microspline left for that smallest 10-tooth cog to grab onto. So that shallow little groove, take a look at that. That is all that the smallest cog is biting into. So let's get that lined up and I'll show you what it looks like using that little hole as a guide. Makes it nice and easy. So that's it. That 10 tooth, if you're pedaling that's being driven by the little grooves of the 12th tooth cog right behind it. And then you've got a fairly deep lock nut that goes in there and that threads into the hub, and voila, you get your cassette together. No need for spacers or anything because the microsplines are built from the ground up for that 12 speed. So easy peasy once you get everything lined up. Wondering why they do it this way? Because it lets them mix materials like titanium and alloy and keep manufacturing costs down, which means they can produce a cassette that's more affordable for you. All right, so how do the cassettes compare? So this is the Dior cassette. All 12 cogs are steel. It has a steel lock ring and painted carrier and pretty similar construction you're going to see across all of them. But this is Dior, comes in at 589 grams. When you move up to SLX, the 51 tooth cog switches to aluminum and it's anodized for durability and looks, really. And the other main difference is the lock nut switches to aluminum. So just those two things switching to aluminum saves an incredible 55 grams over Dior. So the finished weight for this is 534 grams, keeps the same painted carrier as Dior. Move up to XT and you get one extra alloy cog, and that also anodized, alloy lock ring, otherwise very similar. So the bottom 10 here are still, you still have the painted carrier or spider, and the weight drops to 470 grams. So just the swap from a steel cog here to aluminum drops a massive 64 grams. It's actually pretty incredible how much weight these bigger cogs save by switching to aluminum. And then we have XTR. At the top of the range, you have only 4 steel cogs. The middle 5 are titanium, and the biggest 3 are aluminum. Keep the aluminum lock ring, but what's really interesting on the back is the carrier switches to anodized instead of painted, but the alloy chainrings switch to painted instead of anodized. The whole thing comes in a lot lighter. This saves 103 grams over XT to come in at 367 grams, making it really one of the lightest, super wide range modern cassettes out there. One of the little things I wanted to point out is just how smooth and clean all of the pins are. They're nice and flat here on XTR. It's just one of those little attention to details. And you know, XT is no slouch, but let's just compare that. You can see they're just, you know, pressed in. You can see more of that dimple where they're riveted into place on front and back on XT. So it's really just a small little attention to detail that helps set XTR apart from the rest. Of course, you're not moving anything across that cassette without a shifter and a derailleur. So we'll start with shifters, and they have some obvious differences on the outside, including their adjustment range in terms of where they sit on the bar, especially when used with Shimano's I-Spec brake lever clamps. But the bigger differences are internal and really have to do with feel and functionality. All of the shifters come in band clamp models or I-Spec EV. If you go with I-Spec EV, you get 14 millimeters of lateral adjustment, helping you position the shifter further inboard or outboard on your handlebar. They also come with varying degrees of rotational adjustment, and there's more to it than just that. It's not exactly what it seems, so let me show you the different models, and then I'll show you how that works for real. Dior comes with Rapid Fire Plus, which means you can downshift up to 3 gears at once, and two-way release, which means you can either push or pull to release the cable. Dior gets 10 degrees of I-Spec rotation if you go with the I-Spec ones, and comes with their OptiSlick cables. Claimed weight for the shifter is 132 grams. SLX also gets the Rapid Fire Plus, so up to 3 shifts on the downshift and two-way release, so you can pull or push to go to a harder gear. The I-Spec increases to 20 millimeters of rotational adjustment around the bar. You'll find that there's some glass fiber reinforced cover parts and other parts. You have a steel lever with a glass fiber reinforced cover, which is actually the same construction as the Dior ones, and it comes with their OptiSlick cables. So the weight on this is 117 grams, which is only a couple grams lighter than the Dior model. XT's Rapid Fire Plus adds a shift, so now you get 1, 2, 3, 4 shifts on a single push. It keeps the two-way release, so you can pull or push to release, but it adds multi-release. And that means that when you push this, you can get 1, 2 harder shifts in a single push. It also adds instant release, which means that whereas on the others you have to like click and release before it'll shift, this one shifts as soon as it clicks. So it'll shift just a little bit quicker than Dior and SLX. It adds or keeps the same 20 millimeters of rotational I-spec adjustment as Dior, but it adds an ergonomic improvement. So now this lever is aluminum with a nice little rubbery textured thumb pad there to help you grip it and shift a little bit easier and faster. Inside, it upgrades the lever and other movements to use 2 bearings. So on SLX and Dior, they're all bushings inside. This one gets 2 actual bearings. Weight is 117 grams, so it's pretty much exactly the same weight as SLX. It's just going to feel and shift a lot better and do a few more things. XTR has all the same rapid-fire, 2-way, multi-instant release features of XT, but it upgrades to a massive 60 degrees of I-spec angle rotation adjust, and it upgrades to a slicker polymer-coated cable. Inside, it upgrades to 4 bearings. So where XT had 2 bearings and the others had bushings, this one has 4 bearings. So any moving part is basically on a bearing now, and it's going to feel just a little bit nicer and a little bit smoother. The covers and small parts are upgraded to carbon fiber reinforced plastic. The main lever is still aluminum with a nice rubber thumb pad, but the release lever is upgraded to carbon reinforced plastic as well. So it's just a tiny bit lighter. It's 5 grams lighter than XT, coming in at 112 grams. Now, about that rotational range, it's actually based on the I-spec brake clamp. So if you were to take a Dior shifter and pair it with an XTR brake lever, you'd actually have a full 60 degrees of rotational adjustment range for the Dior shifter. Okay, let's move on to derailleurs. So all 4 of Shimano's 12-speed rear derailleurs use their Shadow Plus design, and that basically means 2 things. First, it means that it has a very low profile design. So if this is your axle, the derailleur doesn't like jut out like this. It's tucked in closer underneath the cassette, so it's less likely to get hit by a rock or a log or whatever you happen to be smashing through. Second, it's the clutch, which helps the system stay quieter and keep your chain from bouncing so hard it comes off the chainring. This is the off position, which means the pulley system is really easy to move, which is great for when you have to take the wheel out of the bike to change a flat. Flick it on and it adds a lot more tension, and it makes it harder to shift a little bit. You'll feel more friction on the shift lever, but you can adjust that. So this is the SLX derailleur. This one and the Dior both have a 3-bolt cover plate covering the clutch. So you have to pull these bolts out and move this cover off to adjust the tension on the clutch. With the XT rear derailleur and XTR, you have a little rubber port here covering an adjustment screw. So you just stick an Allen key in there and you're able to quickly and easily adjust tension trail side. And that lets you fine tune it. So for smaller hands or younger riders that maybe don't have quite as much grip strength, you can make it a little bit easier to shift while still keeping enough tension on there to keep the chain in place. From there, it's largely about material differences and, again, the manufacturing technique and precision tolerances. Starting with Dior, there's some commonalities in all the derailleurs. So these pins that the parallelogram pivots on as you move through the gears, there are 7 fluoric-coated bushings throughout them that they pivot on. So with Dior, you get glass fiber reinforced body parts here, a steel cage for the pulleys, and a non-hollow steel attachment bolt. And this one comes in at 318 grams. When you move up to SLX, it keeps the bushings inside. So inside the pulley wheels, they're just bushings that they spin on, not bearings. And one thing I wanted to notice, so again, as they move up the line, there's tighter tolerances, right? So here, get just a tiny bit of play. With the Dior, you can even hear it. Let's see if we can get that closer. You get a decent bit of play in that. And here it's definitely tightened up a lot, but what's funny is until you break that in, these won't spin, but these guys, because it's so loose, spins like crazy. So the thing is though, you're gonna have less precision as it wiggles, which, you know, it's still gonna shift great. It's just not gonna shift quite as crisply as the higher level ones. So with the SLX, you end up on painted alloy pulley cage plates, so you save a little bit of weight there. You get alloy attachment bolt and still glass fiber reinforced parts here, and you'll notice there's a little bit of less material, a little more shaping in here, you know, cutouts here, and on the back you can see it's just a little more refined looking, although very similar shaping on the backs for these two. Okay, when we move to XT, you step up to sealed cartridge bearings inside the pulley wheels. So here you have virtually no play at all. So you are going to get some crisper shifts. You still have alloy plates down here, but you notice there's a long full cutout here versus on the XLX there's two. And if you look really closely, you can see a little bit different shaping in those plates. Same on the back. If we go to the back, you'll see that it's just a little bit leaner, a little bit more cut out there. And I forgot to mention, SLX is 316 grams, so it's only 2 grams lighter than Dior. With XT, you get just, you know, cutouts here, a little bit more of a groove there, and a little bit different shapes of this plate as well. And just a little more refinement. Alloy attachment bolt, glass fiber reinforced parts here, and also another upgrade. So when you get the 51 tooth derailleurs on Dior and up, you get these little rubber bumper plates just to give it a little extra protection from smashing stuff. XT is 285 grams, which is 31 grams lighter than SLX. Now, when we get to XTR, we're almost looking at a different animal here. So you do have a carbon fiber reinforced plastic cage plate, and it's almost a shame that they paint it, because I literally took my own XTR derailleur and etched away just to convince myself that it wasn't metal, because it almost sounds like metal, it looks like metal, but it is in fact carbon fiber reinforced plastic there. You have a nice anodized alloy plate here, so that anode saves just a, you know, fraction of a gram versus, well, that one's anode, but painted on some of the other ones. The other thing, because this is not metal, the other ones have an etched little guide mark for setting up the derailleur where it says 51 tooth there. This one's printed on. Clutch works the same, but here again, it's carbon fiber reinforced plastics instead of the glass fiber reinforced plastics. Little more shaping here, and then you're starting to get into some really streamlined parts. So if you look at the cable pull arm here, you'll notice on XTR, it's just a little bit leaner. It's different shaping on it. And then there's some other parts in the back that I'm really gonna have to try and get some photos to show you. But this in here, you look at that part there and look at how lean that is. And then compare that to, try and get these on a clearer background for you. You know, it's just a little bulkier on the XT one. More material removed on XTR. Now there's other small differences that you're never going to notice. So those fluorine coated bushings here, where there's 7 on all the others, there's 8 located inside XTR, so it's going to be just a tiny bit smoother. The adjustment bolt upgrades to alloy instead of steel, and that's kind of the big changes in there. You keep the sealed cartridge bearings on the pulley wheels. This one comes in at 237 grams, so it's a whopping 48 grams lighter than XT. And that, my friends, covers all of the components and technology on Shimano's latest 12-speed mountain bike groups. If you want a bullet point list recap of all of the little comparisons and tech specs that we went through in this video, check out the full post on bikerumor.com, and you'll find a link to that in this video's description down below. If you like this video and you want more killer tech videos and reviews, hit like, hit subscribe, and ring that little bell so that you get notified every time we post something new. Thanks a ton for watching, and we'll see you next time.